Hello and welcome. I'm so excited for this episode of the Overcome Yourself podcast. As you know, I'm Nicole and this is Jennifer Jones Zarcus today. And she is going to be talking to us all about how she helps authors. So take it away, Jennifer. Introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm Jennifer Jones, and I am a writing coach. I've been teaching writing in one form or another since 2001. I trained to teach it during my PhD at the University of California at Davis. And since I left academia in 2016, I've been working as a writing coach. This writing really doesn't have to be as hard as we make it.
That is so true. So tell me a little bit about your story and how you help entrepreneurs tell their story through their books.
I help my clients get out of their own way. Whenever we write, we tend to want the first draft to be clean copy, ready to go out. That's what a lot of us did at school. I know I had a lot of undergraduate essays written the night before they were due. But that's not the easy way to write. We tell ourselves that we write better under pressure, but we don't. Whenever you split the process up into the drafting stage, sorting stage, and editing stage, then it all gets easier because no one stage is difficult. What's hard is doing it all at once.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. And it's perfect because my book is called Overcome Yourself. And it's basically the story about how I had to get out of my own way. So what is a tip that you have for entrepreneurs, getting out of their own way, overcoming themselves, and telling the story? Like, what do you advise your clients to do?
Do not overcomplicate things. Writing is really like clearing out your wardrobe for North Americans' closet. The first step is dumping all of your ideas on the page, and that shouldn't be any more stressful than throwing all of your clothes from the wardrobe onto the bed so you can see what you have. And the next step is sorting it into what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of, and what needs to be fixed. Then you fix the things, cut the things, and then you put it all back in a user-friendly way and make it all neat and pretty. So whenever we start getting stuck on, you can't start the thing that you're writing because you don't have the right opening sentence, that would be like taking out a jacket you haven't worn in 5 years, tailoring it to fit you now, and then deciding whether you want to keep it or not. You wouldn't do that. So don't do that with your words.
That makes so much sense. I love that analogy because it takes something that seems so intangible, your book, the words, the ideas, and makes it something that's relatable that we can all like visualize and be like, okay, and so the words, the sentences, the chapters are like all those clothes. And it really is like that. Like we kind of have to lay it all out. And I'm thinking of the process that I went through with my book, and how I did try to do it all at once. In the beginning, and I have my editor and she was like, hold on, let's pump the brakes here, and then let's do it one step at a time. And it just changes everything, it really does. It makes the process so much more simple. And tell us how that translate into getting your story. Like, how is it beneficial for entrepreneurs to write their books and get their stories out there? Like, do you work with other entrepreneurs and they use this as a part of their overall marketing system, right? So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, your book is basically 100 or more pages of evergreen content. And if you think about how many social media posts you can pull out of your book, and they're always going to be true for most of our books. I mean, how you write a book probably isn't going to change significantly in the next century. So it does provide you with evergreen content. It also, the process of writing it, and this is why those write your book in a weekend courses sort of make me cringe, because you're denying yourself the process. But the process of writing it and putting everything you know out in order, and then printing out that first draft, and then you really feel the physical weight of all of your knowledge. And that makes you have to appreciate how far you've come and how much you know. And I think especially for women entrepreneurs, we tend to dismiss our accomplishments and we don't want to shout about them. But whenever you write it all out, you can't say, well, no, that's just this little thing that I do. No, it's a little thing that you wrote a book about. And it also gives you a good way to, if you've got somebody who's thinking about working with you and your book is about how you work with people, then you can give them a copy of your book and then they can make an informed decision and you're not having to be salesy. There is no hard sale in the book. The book is just what your process is. And then they can learn it. A few will go off and do it on their own, but the vast majority of people need the coach who wrote the book. So
Right. No,
once you
that
can, we'll
makes
hire you.
so much sense. And like that's what I was trying to get to is there's like this, I guess it's kind of like the hero's journey. You go through your own hero's journey when I'm just realizing this. Oh my God, it's so cool. Because like when I started my book, when I wrote out that first draft and I was like, this is my book, and then I set it down and then I read it again. There was a lot of parts that were like, wow, this is great. And there were some parts that were like, what? And there's like this process of growth that happened within me too, because I had to look at how do I know what I know? Like it makes you think about, okay, so many things. And then the confidence, like you were saying, that you develop when exactly what you said, like you write it out and you're like, I did all of this. Like, oh, wow, it's so cool. Like, because when you look at it over your life and you see a bunch of accomplishments, you might not, it looks so vast, but when you start writing it all out, you're like, oh my goodness, this is, like I did all of this, like, oh my goodness, like I did all of this, I grew and and it's such a beautiful process of growth. And you're right, if you just stop with that first draft, like the book that I have now after the editing and after going and the soul searching, um it's the majority of it, the same words that were there when I started. I took out some of it, but it's so different. Like there was so much that I had to weave back into it, and I broke down the chapters, and there was so much of my soul that went into it, and I wouldn't have been able to do that in a weekend. So maybe you could write your first draft. You can, like you said, write out everything that you let it all out, but then that actual process of developing the book and editing it and sorting it, like you said, that makes so much sense. And I didn't know that. Now I had to go through that and write it out in a weekend so I could learn the process, right? Does that make sense? Because, you know, I don't want to tell you, don't try to write a book in a weekend, because if maybe, you get that inspiration, that could be a great first draft. Because I wrote my the first draft, I hurt my back and I sat in my bed. And so it was like 3 or 4 days that all I did was pound away. But if I had published that,
And that's where I have an issue with those book in a weekend courses, is they then encourage them to publish what they wrote in a weekend. But writing your book first draft that fast is actually how you should do it. Your first draft needs to be written as quickly as possible so that you can basically write before your internal editor can get in the way and start questioning everything. But don't publish what you wrote that quickly.
Good. Okay, so yay, I'm on track. That's awesome. Yeah, and oh my God, that makes so much sense. So tell me a little bit more about like I see that you have a book download here. Download my book. So can you tell me a little bit more about that and the Writers Club and how you help authors like do this process and get to know themselves and stuff?
Of course. The book is called There's a Book in Every Expert That's You. And it does take you from the vague idea that you want to write a book through all of the steps to having a ready to publish manuscript. There is an afterword in there by Sam Pierce. She was the publishing consultant who published the book. So she sort of briefly talks you through how to do the last step of getting it actually out. And if you do decide to publish it yourself instead of going through a consultant, definitely get Sam's book. It's called Stress-Free Self-Publishing, How to Self-Publish Without Losing the Will to Live. And
Okay, that sounds like a great recommendation.
and it does lay it all out. She's got lots of screenshots so you can see exactly what you're doing on Amazon or Ingram Spark or whatever, so that you can actually figure out how to do it yourself. In my Entrepreneurs Writing Club, I support entrepreneurs with all sorts of writing, from tweets to books. So whatever you're writing, we will welcome you. And we're having a bit of a summer break in August. I live in the UK, and so all of the schools are out right now. And so most of my group are taking care of kids. So when we come back in September, we will go back to having 2 co-writing hours a week, where you just drop into a Facebook room in the group and we write together. And it's amazing how much more focused you are just having other people on screen writing. And that's a great place to, if you're working on a book, do that. If you need to write the text for social media posts or write a blog post or whatever, you're welcome. And
Oh,
bring in
cool.
guest experts, and yeah, it's a good space.
I love it. That is amazing. I love the idea of the group co-writing, because writing, working from home and, it can be kind of lonely. I talk about it on my podcast a lot. And so having that connection, especially with other authors, that's so important. And in those co-working hours, that's awesome. Let me see. I'm going through the notes. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, so one of the things that it says in your bio is that you like to research Victorian medicine. And so that's kind of cool that as authors, we really get to learn about what we love, because we get to write about it. So can you talk to me a little bit about that, how you translate that passion, into being an author and everything?
Yeah, well, if I'd stayed in academia, I would have continued researching as well as teaching. So I'm basically continuing that. But since I'm not in academia anymore, I don't have to write for that audience. I get to write the fun stuff. And the Victorian medicine stuff right now is looking at how they responded to the introduction of anesthesia. So not at all what you would expect. You would think, okay, if you just breathe this chloroform, you don't have to feel me cut your leg off. You'd be all over that. Some of them were, but others worried that it was the pain that kept you alive, or that their soul would get lost if they took the chloroform. Quite why they were worried about that, I don't know. They were, a lot of them, getting drunk and taking morphine, so that was okay. But the chloroform, scary. And then, so you had the ones who were afraid of it or wouldn't take it at one end. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the ones that they would take it at dinner parties. We've got this idea of the Victorians as being all straight laced, but the chloroform was a party drug for them. So
Interesting.
It's just fascinating. And the way it turns up in court cases and in fiction, that's what I'm going to focus on in the book. So
That is so cool. And I love it. There are so many things that I ended up researching and learning about, because it just makes you even more of an expert in whatever you're writing about, because there's always going to be something that you're going to be like, is this true? Let me check it out. And then you go down these really cool rabbit holes of learning new things. So do you have any last minute tips for entrepreneurs who want to build their authority? That's actually one of the things I'm going to be training about in my group, through your book, right? Like building your confidence and your authority. So like top 3 tips for our listeners.
if you want to do it, make a plan. Don't let it be the someday, because someday will never get here. So make a plan, get the support you need, and do it. Start advertising your book the day you decide you're going to start writing it. Start telling people that you are working on a book. That starts positioning you as an expert. And whenever I said earlier that your book is basically 100 or more pages of evergreen content, your draft is too. So you can start pulling stuff as you're writing your book, so that you're not trying to write your Facebook content for the week and work on your book. They can be the same words. And most of us who are wanting to build our authority go on to do public speaking, whether it's podcasts or conferences on physical stage or virtual. Your book gives you an excellent starting point for a signature talk, and it speaking and writing really go hand in hand.
And I have a question about something that you mentioned. So can we quote ourselves? So like because obviously this podcast is named after my book, so like that's the whole point, right? Is building my authority with the name, and letting people know, hey, there's a book coming out, so yay, I'm on the right track again. But one of the things I wondered is, can I quote myself? Is that a bad thing, like putting my words out there before it's technically published? So is that cool? Am I allowed?
You can absolutely quote yourself, and especially if you are self-publishing, you have all of the rights to your words. You can reuse as many of them wherever you want.
Even before it's published?
Even before you publish.
Cool.
If you publish traditionally, then they're not going to want more than 10% of the book usually to be reused. So that gets into, because if you publish, say, with Penguin, they have distribution rights. Right. So you keep the intellectual property, but you can't reshare the words. Exactly. But if you're self-publishing, you own the words, you can reuse them as many times as you want, wherever you want. And the way copyright works, I know in the UK, it's been a long time since I looked at it in the US. I've been over here since 2007. But as soon as you write the words, wherever you write them, they are yours. You don't have to file for copyright protection.
I've read that too, but check with your lawyers. We're not lawyers, so disclaimers. Yes, very cool. So that's a really good point, because that is a great way, like that's content that, you've already created the content. Nicole, you've already created the content. So yeah, let's make some graphics on Canva and start sharing. Woo! Awesome. Well, I think this has been an awesome half hour. Thank you so much for joining me, Jennifer. Is there any last minute little tidbits that you'd like to give us before we sign off?
Just download the book, and do let me know if you have questions. And the emails that you'll get after you download the book, I ask you how you're getting on. I really do want to know. So reply and let me know.
That is awesome. Links are going to be included in the notes of this. So be sure to download that book. I know I'm going over there to download the book. And then I will make sure to also get the other link for the other book that you mentioned. And make sure that that's in the comments as well, because if we're going to go the self-publishing route like I am, that's going to be a great resource for all of us to have.
Sam put, there's a link to her website in afterward for my book. So
perfect.
If you decide later, I wish I had it, as long as you've got my book, you've got her details. So
perfect. I'll go ahead and look through that, and I'll get it for everyone. Awesome. So thank you so much, Jennifer, for joining us. This has been awesome, so informative. And I guess I will see you on Facebook. I can't wait to partake in the co-working sessions with you guys. This is awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.